to the Natural Resources Financial Flow Taxation and Traceability session. We will be having shadow presentation in 2 slots, 4 presentation plus 3. Each one will have 8 minutes plus 2 minutes for quick questions about methodology or some doubts. And then after the first 4 presentation, we have here the presenters, we will be having 15 minutes of discussion, after which we will have the second part, the second slot of 3 presentations. We are co-sharing here, my friend Luis and I. I'm Lorena, he is Luis. So anything you need, here we are. And I don't know if there is people online with us. So welcome everybody that is okay. So to the attendees online, you can write questions and we will be here helping you to read your question to the presenters. So our first presentation is, excuse me, see, fantastic. This is super top technology. That's wow. Curbing illicit finance flow risk in Ghana crude oil sales. Legal and other policy option presenter is Jennifer Hall from the Swiss Program for Research on Global Issue for Development from Switzerland and the University of Ghana. So Jennifer, the floor is yours. I think your presentation is already here. I will be taking your time. You can start. The floor is yours.
So good afternoon. My topic is on curbing illicit financial flow risk in Ghana's crude oil sales, legal and policy proposals. To start, this topic is important, I believe, for 2 main reasons. The first being that at the moment, Ghana is still highly dependent on its resources for accruing revenues. And also for the reason that there's evidence that of the potential of greater resource mobilization from its sale of crude oil. Currently, there's evidence that not all the revenues that are being accrued are being transmitted into government treasuries. And also there's evidence of illicit financial flows in the whole value chain. My research focuses on the legal and regulatory gaps that actually create avenues or enable illicit financial flows in crude oil sales. Now, to put the presentation into some context, Ghana sells its crude oil through 2 main means. One is by spot sales and the other is by long-term sales. Ghana has undertaken 2 types of long-term sales. One with an organization known as Unipec Asia and another one with Litasco. Now, these 2 long-term sales have created avenues for illicit financial flows, which I will talk about briefly, very shortly. Now, it's also worth mentioning that Ghana's share of oil is sold by GNPC, which is a national oil company, and also by 6 private companies. Usually, a lot of research has not focused on the sale of oil by these private companies and the potential for illicit financial flows in the sale of oil by these private companies. But then with my research, I identify the potential of IFFs, that's illicit financial flows, when it comes to the sale of crude oil by these private oil companies. And I'll look at that also, I'll discuss that also very briefly. So I identify 4 main interrelated avenues for illicit financial flows in crude oil sales in Ghana. The first has to do with the mingling of oil sale transactions with other government transactions. Two examples, and this usually happens with long-term sales. So the first one has to do with the contract that Ghana had with Unipec Asia. So the government entered into an arrangement whereby it used as crude oil as collateral for a loan that it acquired from Unipec Asia. Now, because the government decided to mix its sale of oil with another transaction, which is a loan transaction, it then creates an avenue for illicit financial flows, because at the end of the day, you are collateralizing our oil for a volatile product or commodity. And over the years, we've realized that the prices have changed. In 2014, for instance, oil prices dropped. So Unipec Asia decided not to even give the second tranche of the loan, because they realized that they were not getting as much as they, in terms of repayment of the loan, they were not getting what they were supposed to get in terms of repayment of the loan. So it allows, entering into such transactions allows the government to make compromises on the contracts that they have with the company. Now, the second one has to do with Litasco, which was not really an oil-backed transaction, but then had to do with an arrangement that Ghana had with the Litasco company, where Litasco gave it some bank guarantees to enable the country to improve on its power generation. So Litasco was supposed to act as a guarantor in the event that Ghana is not able to pay back its loan. Now, in that instance, there's evidence that the price at which Ghana was selling its oil to Litasco was lower than what was being sold to other companies. So that actually leads to underpricing, which is also an avenue for illicit financial flows. Then we also have the risk of corruption and rent seeking, which is quite very prevalent in Ghana, because in the situation where currently there's a legal gap where there is not there are no laid down rules and regulations for buyer selection. So this allows the government to kind of circumvent even the few laws that are there, to choose people who are politically motivated and sell crude oil to them. And in the long run, we are not able to accrue what we are supposed to accrue in terms of revenue. Then also this is very important, because there's also the risk of IFFs in the negotiation of oil prices. Well, usually there's oil prices are said to be determined, but then there's a prevailing market price for oil. But then because of also the issue of corruption, there are times that even though there's the price there's a stipulated price to sell crude oil, there are times that the government can make arrangements with private individuals and sell to them at lower prices. And also there's the risk of transfer pricing by private oil companies operating in Ghana. Now, this usually occurs when the parent company, for instance, sells crude oil at a higher price. Now, then usually the subsidiary company, which is resident in Ghana, will actually disclose that they sold their crude oil at spot price. But then that goes to affect what the government accrues in corporate income tax, because we are not aware of what the parent company actually accrued. So I've kind of basically talked about the legal and regulatory gaps. So our recommendations, the paper recommends a few things that to make resource-backed loans really transparent, and to reform oil sale price and options. And by doing that, we also need to establish an autonomous body to implement these options. And then also the need to impose hard legal requirements for transparency in oil sale contracts. and also to amend Ghana's income tax law to include provisions on taxation of hedge income from crude oil sales, because currently there's a gap in the law where there is no provision on imposing taxes on hedged income. And then, of course, we need to improve in the implementation of beneficial ownership regimes that will help to address the problems of corruption and rent seeking in the process. Thank you.
Quick questions, or maybe we could reserve the questions for the discussions. Someone does have some doubts or quick questions? No.
Just a quick, can you comment on your methodology and how easy or difficult it was to collect the information you got?
All right, so we basically used desktop research and then interviews with experts in the field. That was basically how I came back by these findings. It was difficult because it's hard getting information on something as say secretive as crude oil sales, because a lot of companies actually don't disclose the price at which they are selling their crude oil, the terms of the contract. And even though we're able to get an interview with managers at Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, which is the national oil company, you still see that there's a lot of information being withheld. So those are the challenges that I had in coming up with this research.
Another quick question? No? So we go for the second presentation. This is measuring trade mispricing in Ghana international commodity trade, a case of barrier and of bauxite and manganese. It's Angela Alou from University of Ghana. Angela, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so my voice is not the best. So this was actually part of my thesis, right? And then I'm happy to receive feedback to even improve it further for publication, right? So Ghana has a lot of minerals, right, including bauxite and manganese that are exported. And then these two actually represent an interesting case because the ultimate owners are Chinese companies, like for both bauxite and manganese, right? So, okay, so I won't go too much into this because I think illicit financial flows, there's been quite some talk about it. And then the World Bank defined it as money that's illegally and transferred or used that crosses borders. And there's been the talk about, in a sense, finding out ways to plug the leakages that lead to a lot of African countries losing money, so that it's almost like illicit financial flows is the opposite side of domestic revenue mobilization. So then while you are trying to raise money with taxes, if you are losing it on the other side, then obviously you are not going to make much anyway. And then among the various forms of illicit financial flows, one of the ones that seems to be the largest is what's known as trade mispricing, or sometimes trade misinvoicing. And then the UN high-level panel estimated that it was more than 54% of Africa's IFFs are due to trade mispricing. So we want to find this out. And then they also realized that it tends to be much more prevalent in the extractives and then in the commodity sector, sometimes because of the secrecy that's involved in the contracts that are signed. So this one uses a commodity level perspective, that's just bauxite and manganese. So to give you so method-wise, made use of value chain analysis. So it used to be that the quantitative estimates that from an economics perspective was mainly done using what's known as the, what do you call it? The partner country trade gap method, which has been used since about the 1960s. And then they just used to make use of an arbitrary range that's about 10%. So it's assumed that the 10% should cater for the transportation costs and then insurance, right? And then any prices that are either above or below that would be indicative of trade mispricing. But there were lots of criticisms of that. So then one of the other methods that came up was now trying to use value chain analysis to understand how the commodity even operates, since what happens in one commodity may not necessarily be the same that happens in another commodity. And then with the price filter method, so this has even recently been adopted by, I think, UNCTAD as well. So right now, even on their website, they post the various transportation and insurance costs that apply to specific commodities. So which means it's no longer just the 10%. But I think at the time that I was doing the study, that wasn't out yet. And then out of another method which uses transaction level data instead of the should I say macro level data, that's the price filter method, right? It's in two parts. There's one that uses free market prices and then another that uses a statistical methodology. So for commodities such as bauxite and manganese that do not have free market prices, because it's mostly spots, it's mostly bilateral trades, then you end up having to use the interquartile range, which has a lot of challenges because it already assumes that about 50% of whatever trading is being done will be mispriced. But in the absence of free market prices, for now, that remains the methods that you can make use of. So as I mentioned, both companies are owned by Chinese companies. So Ghana Bauxite is owned by the Bosai Group, which is a Chinese company. And then Ghana Manganese is owned by the China Tianyuan Manganese Limited. So Ghana Manganese actually used to be owned by Cosmin, which was a company in Jersey, but they were taken over by China Tianyuan. And then some research by Reedhead showed that commodities such as bauxite and bauxite tend to be vulnerable to undervaluation because you don't have like free market prices, and then it's mostly very limited spot sales. And interestingly, even in Ghana bauxite was lumped with quite a 3.5 million tax liability for transfer pricing and underselling to its mother company. And then based on the research as well, the estimates that I generated, when you compare the exports of Ghana's exports with China's imports of manganese, you realize that the reported exports from Ghana are only half of the imports from China. And then that could somewhat be indicative of misinvoicing. So I quickly show them. So what I did was that even though the partner country trade gap method has been criticized, it was good to still try to compare the estimates from both, just to essentially have a sense of what was happening, like either way, both with the price filter, we have the the price filter, you have the what you call it, both the undervaluation, that's the below 25% and then above. Okay, so sorry, I'm almost out of time. Okay, so I'll just show this one too. And then for manganese, so you had what you call it, mispricing happening in both commodities, and then quite large amounts as well. And you find both over and then underpricing. And then we realized that one of the important things would be to essentially enhance even the data capacities of the institutions that are involved in exporting, because you find that in terms of oversight, you have a number of different institutions, and then sometimes that can create some duplications, which can allow a lot of other things to get out of the way. Thank you.
Yes?
So can you just tell us briefly the level of what they call it, illicit financial flows? I didn't see any figure. Just, you know, on average, over and above or something.
Okay, sure. So I think these ones were what you call it, more on the country, on the yearly levels, right? But for undervaluation overall over the period, you have about 18.9% for bauxite, right? For, yes, 18.9% over the period. And then for overvaluation, it's about 4.7%. Then for manganese, sorry, and then for the partner country trade gap method, that's as much as about 74%. So then the overvaluation was actually the like the lowest for that, which is essentially quite consistent, like with literature, that there would be more incentive for undervaluation from a developing country perspective than for overvaluation. And then based on the criticisms of the partner country trade gap method too, it's not too surprising that their results would be, should I say, quite different too. But interestingly, for manganese, rather, you had the undervaluation just being about 0.65%, right? Whereas the revaluation was about 2.5% over the period. And then the I think I do remember the what you call it, the full percentage for the overvaluation for the manganese. It was about 9.4 million USD. Yes.
Thank you. Maybe we can also get that question for the discussion so we can discuss after with the other presentation. I find really interesting your data.
Okay.
I have myself some questions about it. So our next presenter is, fantastic, thank you. It's curbing illicit financial flow from resource-rich developing countries, improving resources governance to finance the SDGs, SDC and SNSF, mapping of illicit financial flow in artisanal and small-scale mining sector in Ghana. And the presenter is Abigail Tete Yankee.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I have a very long title, a mouthful, and well done for reading all. That's just by the way. All right, so my research is feeding into a 6 years project by the Geneva Institute, and the broader level of the research is looking at the first part of the title. So curbing illicit financial flow from resource-rich developing country, improving resource governance to finance the SDGs. I am focusing on the mapping of IFF in the artisanal and small-scale mining sector. From now, I'll call it the ASGM. Basically, I'll give a brief on IFF and then launch into brief on methodology and focus on the findings. So IFF, as we all know, is a global shared problem because it's happening in both developed and also developing countries. Looking at the various figures, trillions of money is estimated to go into IFF through various means. So in a narrow sense, the World Bank, as Angela indicated, is focusing on the use, how it's earned and how it's transferred. But in a broader sense, it goes, and then you can include corruption, you can include capital flights, you can add on and on with it. Ghana is not an exception to this, and particularly in Africa, it's a problem. And my research is more focused on Ghana. Ghana is estimated that over 6 billion worth of gold is unaccounted for between the year of 2013 and 2016. The major areas estimated by the World Bank and then the UNTAC is 3 areas: India, including Switzerland, and then the UAE. The key thing about this is the fact that when they look at the exports being reported by Ghana in terms of gold, it's more than what the recipient country reported. So there is that gap, and that gap is possible, may create IFF. My research focuses on the various hubs of the artisanal small-scale gold mining sectors in Ghana. So Ghana has 2 major, we don't have the middle gold mining sector, but we have the large and then the small scale. The large scale takes about 80%, the small scale is 20%, but it employs majority of workers in there. And then it is also estimated that about 80% of operations within the small scale is done illegally. And when you look at the orange colors, it's telling you about the various hubs of the small scale mining sectors. The research mainly focus on desktop and also field work by looking at the Ashanti region, the Western region. You can see, I don't know if the Western region, and then the Greater Accra, to focus on regulators and talk to regulators to triangulate the findings. Basically, the main aim of this research is to map the crisis of IFF in the ASGM sector in Ghana and the plausible measures to keep the menace to boost IFF inflows in the sector in the country. To keep IFF, sorry. To look at this, we look at the production side, we also look at the trading, and then also look at the smuggling side. To do this, the main focus of the 3 areas was on the mining sites, on the domestic trading field, and then the smuggling field. At the mining site, it revealed a number of actors. So you have the right from when people express interest to mine, it starts from the chiefs, and I can't go into the various land issues when it comes to ownership and control of land. It also has pre-financiers, it also has licit and illicit miners, as well as mercury sales, and then even government partners within the various mining sites. You also have the domestic trading field, which includes both licensed and unlicensed traders. It includes middlemen and middle buyers, unlicensed gold buyers, and then smuggling side has a lot of the regulators in there. Thank you. But let me just say that it's not a linear relationship and it's not straightforward. It's more nuanced because you can find someone from the mining side into the domestic trading field, and then even within the smuggling side, there is an allegation of various leaders, politicians, also interested in the mining side. So it's not a straightforward thing. What the research reveals in terms of finding is about land ownership and control, which is a major problem because the 1992 Constitution of Ghana gives ownership and control in trusts with the government on behalf of the people. But then it also gives some percentage, or the chiefs and the traditional rulers also have some kind of ownership. And these 2 things create a bit of tension when we went to the site, because most of the large-scale mining sites have been given by the government in terms of concession, and the local people are not getting places to mine. Therefore, they engage in the illegalities when you go to the field in terms of not having the land to register. Registration is cumbersome. mercury sales was usual, though there are so many regulations. Ghana has signed international regulations in mercury sales and all that, but there's still an issue with the sales because it's free and people are selling it on the field at the trading side. And then also, with the domestic trading side, we realize that there are multiplicity of actors, and then they don't question the source of the gold when buying. So you have legal traders who are selling gold and who are also buying gold, but then they don't question the source of the gold when it comes to them. We also have a lack of proximity for regulators, of gold regulators. So they want to register, the registration is cumbersome, it is centralized, but it's mostly centralized within Greater Accra region, which is quite a distance. And this also fuels the incentives of getting operating illegally. Most of the issues which also fuels IFF is the fact that the bush prices were more attractive to them than the store prices. So when we went to the field, we realized that the illegal places were choked with people selling, and the trading, the legal registered are more free. Okay, so basically this is about the managing the IFF within the ASGM sector. Just to say that it goes on different levels. At the global level, it has to everybody to walk the talk in terms of what we have planned to do to curb it, in terms of corruption, in terms of smuggling, in terms of capital flight, and name them. At the national level, we have to also walk the talk in terms of the various legislations that we have put in place. And then the community, and then you and I are all responsible to address IFF. I'm very grateful for your time. Yeah.
Yeah, does someone have a quick question? Yes, Rabbi.
Thank you for your presentation. I just was wondering, from your analysis, you mentioned that a lot of the money goes to corruption. But also I was wondering if there's, like, you hear a lot in Latin America that there's a stronger and stronger link between drug and coca with gold laundering. In the case of Ghana, do you see that there's a connection there with another illicit, let's say, a network or activity, or it's more towards corruption?
Thank you very much. It's an interesting question because on the field, I try to push for that to find out how it manifests. And then from the mining, trading, and then even with the regulators, it is clear that yes, there is some kind of illegalities and some kind of IFF manifesting in the gold trading. But then this trading, illegal trading, is also linked to legal trading. So you find how do you call it? Oh, the traders in other genuine goods and services, the multinational corporations dealing and working and selling their things, but then they use the money to buy gold and export it, whether licit or illicit means. So yes, I can't say directly about the UAE, but there was some kind of evidence shared by my respondents in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's have the last presentation of this slot is from Monsieur Gilles Carbonnier, Measuring Illicit Financial Flow, New Data and Method.
Thank you. I think the colleagues have already highlighted many issues I wanted to raise, so let me go out a bit of the PowerPoint to mention that all these research that has been conducted with legal experts, economists, political scientists in Southeast Asia, in Ghana, and also here in Switzerland, has been conducted basically because, well, we had reports saying about 4% of African GDP is siphoned off through illicit financial flows, and most of it is because of the underpricing of commodity exports out of Africa. And the latest report of the Global Financial Integrity is for the year 2018, and they say, well, trade mispricing between developing countries and advanced economies is about 835 billion US dollars, and it's over 5 times official development assistance. So there is much more money flowing out through illicit financial flows than what is funded out of budgets for official development assistance. So this is really at the heart of what we have been doing. Looking also at the fact that SDG, the Sustainable Goal, the 17, is saying we must mobilize more domestic resources to fund the SDGs, and developing countries have to mobilize their own resources. And SDG 16 has one very clear objective, which is to curb or cut down illicit financial flows. And the problem that we had when we entered into these conversations, also with traders here in Geneva, is that we use, as you said, Angela, we use these mirror trade statistics at UNCTAD and others, and the Global Financial Integrity, meaning you look at the exports data of gold from Ghana, the import data of gold in the United Arab Emirates and Switzerland, and you see huge gaps, and you consider that all these gaps are illicit financial flows minus the 10% margin for cost of transport, insurance, and freight. And when you discuss with the traders, they say it's useless. Customs data from Comtrade is completely useless because it does not reflect the reality of trade. So we say, okay, then we cannot start a conversation because we don't agree whether there is illicit financial flows and whether there is a phenomenon. So let's try as academics to bring a third voice in the debates based on hard data. And it's not only hard data, but it's hard work. I can tell you that to collect transaction level data, to have the right quality of the product, the price, the time of the export transaction, it requires a lot of work to get the data from the authorities. Often it's something you have to sign confidentiality agreements to get the database and then to analyze it. So I just give you one example, looking at the trade of gold exports from Ghana. And this is here. So, well, basically what you see, all the blue spots are transactions between 2011 and 2018. And we look at all the transactions of exports of gold from Ghana, and you see that we have a range among a price range which is annexed or indexed to the London bullion market. And you see a lot of underpricing. Most of the transaction points are below the reference price, but there is a range where we can say it's a normal price range because it allows for product heterogeneity, it allows for future contracts, etc. And then you have a number of transactions that are clearly undervalued, so they are abnormally valued. And the question is, how much illicit or illegal is it? Because it's often related to aggressive tax optimization, to abusive transfer pricing, with a view to shift profits out of Ghana, in that case, where you have a corporate income tax, which is normal, and to shift these profits in zero tax or low tax jurisdiction. And once we have the transaction level data, we have looked also at the 16 industrial gold mines to try to see each transaction from which mine it comes, because you have different purity of gold as an average, so of course, if from the shipment from one mine, you have less gold content than the other, it's normal that the price is lower, and you have different splits between gold and silver. So we have to look at all of this to try to make sense. And the big problem is that under the harmonized system of customs classification, you have only 2 categories for gold. And in Switzerland, for instance, for imports, as soon as you have 2% of gold in a shipment, it's classified as gold. and then it is VAT exempt. So that's it's you have tax. It's at 2% of gold content. The whole shipment is considered as gold. So you can have a shipment that has between 2 and 60, 70, 80% of gold. And of course, then the traders tell you, but it's meaningless to tell me your reference price because what we import varies so much in terms of gold content. And this is why we have reconciled this with, going to the mine site and to understand the average mine gold content from each mine. So it's a lot of work to try to get a clearer view. And when we look at the results, just to show you this, well, it's there. When you look at the mirror trade statistics, we have about 13,000 or 13 billion US dollars of gaps. And this is what at the beginning, advocacy group was saying, it's 13 billion illicit financial flows. Through our techniques, we find that there is 3,829. So it's much less, but it is still very significant. But we think that this figure is really credible and that both traders and others cannot say, no, this is not abnormal pricing. It is abnormal pricing. And then let's see concretely how we can get to grip with the phenomenon. So the rest of the work has been really going into solutions, policy recommendations. Some measures are more technical, some measures are more administrative and building the capacities that you were mentioning. I think you mentioned also, Abigail, the need to build the capacities of those offices in charge. And finally, some other measures are much more radical in terms of overhaul of the global taxation regime. And it links up very much with the conversation we have between the OECD and others with regard to tax reforms. So this is a bit where we have been looking at this. And I think the fact that you look at manganese and bauxite and other so-called critical minerals that will be now very much in demand with the energy transition is really important because it's a new rush that can result is yet another resource curse, or it might result is potentially more profits, benefits for those countries that have these minerals. But I think we have to get to grip with this phenomenon and bringing in also the artisanal and small scale add a layer of complexity, because I'm sure there is also some artisanal and small scale gold coming from Burkina Faso. And I just want to conclude with this. It's interesting also to see the level of abnormal pricing between Ghana and different export markets. And we have seen that about 4% of the export to Switzerland are underpriced. It's 10% up to 30% with other jurisdictions. So even the Swiss traders were saying, oh, after all, we are not so bad compared to others. The problem is that then they buy the gold, which has been refined first time in other jurisdiction where the gap is much bigger, and re-import it to smelt again, to melt again the gold, refine it here. So it's a complex global market, and we have really to disentangle that and to try to have a global approach to the phenomenon.
Fantastic. I think it's a really super interesting position, four of you. The four of you, I think it's like we have a match made in heaven in terms of the order of the presentation. So may we open the discussion, maybe 15 minutes, so we can really go in deep of the results of every one of you. Who will open the fires? Yes.
Thank you very much. So I was just thinking in terms of the transaction level analysis, the difficulty in getting such data. What can we do to get this kind of important analysis replicated in other countries? How can we make this possible? Because it's really difficult to get this transaction level data because many people don't want to give you the data. Is there something we can do? Maybe to do the same thing for Nigeria or some other countries.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Janku, I think you already know the difficulty with getting this kind of data. But what I can say is that, especially since this is something that's now in a sense, now becoming more popular, right? And then with what UNCTAD is doing now with trying to get countries to also estimate, and then even looking at other filters. So I think the 10% was a little too high. So if you're able to get, because they actually have a whole database of maybe how much it costs to transport from one country to another one for specific commodities. So which means that in terms of like the really huge gaps that you would have got when you just use the 10%, if you are able to, in the absence of the transaction level data, if you are able to start with, let's say you're using 1% or 2%, because for gold like this, we realized that the cost of transportation was about 2% or less. So which means that if you are generating those estimates using maybe a 2% filter, then in a sense, you are getting closer than someone who's using 10%. And then I think a lot more of it will come down to education, and then the kind of the creation of awareness that when you do the estimates, it's not just for like, you're not only it helps the country itself, because after this we have had the opportunity to talk to train similar others who were trying to do similar research. I think that was in Burkina Faso and then in Senegal as well. So which means that because it's so difficult to get it, it may have to be on a country by country basis. But maybe a wider conversation would be, how do you look at harmonizing the data such that, because even the Comtrade data is provided by the countries, because Comtrade always issues a disclaimer that they are only reporting the figures. They are not the ones who are generating it. So which means that, can the customs in the various countries find ways of generating better data? And then even, is it possible for customs to even be able to do such analysis without necessarily having to wait for think tanks and others to do that? So I think those are some initial thoughts that I have.
Have a second question? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Mario Krause. I'm from the ETH. I think it's really impressive the amount of work that has flown into this, and quite impressed by the precision of the estimates. What I'm wondering a bit is, the last presentation mentioned sort of the difficulties that sort of the amount that is lost here could be either to illicit flows or just, well, not just, but could also be to aggressive tax regimes, right? Have you considered ideas to sort of attribute the proportions of this amount to either kind of source of this amount that is lost?
Maybe there are two elements in your remark and question. The first is the question, how much illegal, illicit. It's interesting because some of the companies have followed what we were saying, but one of them wanted us to change the title of our research and remove the fact that it's illicit financial flows, or else we would be sued. And we say, well, it's abnormal pricing. It's a deviation from what we would expect from a normal price. But then we have to understand exactly what is behind to say, well, this is part of illicit financial flows. And we have done a lot of research with our legal experts out there to say, okay, illicit financial flows, one part is tax evasion, which is illegal, and one part is aggressive tax optimization that goes against the spirit of the law and widely accepted norms, but where you could be debating for ages whether it's directly violate formally a provision. So we see that those norms have an impact on how legislation evolves, and what was legal but illicit becomes illegal and illicit. So we decided not to be too rigid with that, but to be very clear on the, on the distinction between the two. And your second question is a bit more, again, back to how we can understand the phenomenon. It's interesting. Some of the importers and traders say, but all the data you're looking for the customs won't say they don't have it, but we have it, and we can share it with you. So sometimes states officials are even more worried of sharing things that traders who say, well, of course, we know what we import. You ask me if I know how much gold content I have in a shipment, I wouldn't buy something if I'm not sure that there is, this quality and this quantity. So it's in conversation with them, with pre-shipment inspection firms, that I think this push for greater transparency, there is at the narrative level a lot of consensus to say yes, we are all for transparency. But then concretely what it would mean, there are quick gains or low-hanging fruit that could be really done with even, most of the firms, except maybe the more so creative ones that would be ready to share more data with researchers so that we could capture this much better. So, but then there is, as I mentioned, more medium to long-term policy measures that require a broader reform of the way trade is monitored and taxed.
I can't seem to get over this number, the 2% number. How was it determined? And just can you speak more to that? The fact that if you have 2% gold,
you see, it's a bit. There are two issues. There is the classification of gold. So we were a bit laughing because when we look at the Swiss customs, I think there is no less than I don't remember, dozens of subcategories for chocolate, but there is just 2 categories for gold. And we say, why don't we add a number of categories to distinguish 2% from 60%, because it's not the same product that we import. Then the 2% is for the sake of exempting the import from value-added tax. And this is a measure that not only Switzerland is taking, but the major refining countries, the United Arab Emirates, possibly India, are taking, so that you can attract gold doré or rough gold imports to have them refined in your country and resold on the world market. And since it's resold elsewhere, the VAT exemption is one measure that contributes to making Switzerland or another country more attractive in terms of first destination. And an anecdote, when we launched the project, I think it's very timely because there are 2 anecdotes that really struck me when we were first in Ghana with some of the colleagues. We went to the Ghana Revenue Authority, and they had these T-shirts, "Our taxes, our future," which is very much true. And they had other T-shirts, etc., with Ghana Beyond Aid. And to go beyond aid, you need to mobilize your own resources, domestic resources from what you generate. And I think we are in the heart of it. But then I recall that I think it was the president who came back from the United Arab Emirates and was very angry because he got there with his briefing file with a number for how much gold they had exported to the United Arab Emirates. And by being there, he was received by his counterparts who said, "Oh, we imported double of what you just tell me you exported." So he said, "What? Come on, what's?" So even at this level of either heads of states or minister of economy, it's when they travel, they say, "Look, I don't have the same briefing file as you have," and this is an issue for policymakers as well. So how do you want Parliament then to be able to set up a budget and know exactly how much they can generate if these numbers are useless?
Well, thank you very much. I think we are just on time. Thank you for maybe if we have more question and exchange, because I got my question and I would like to talk with you after the session. We could continue. So I leave you with Luis.
Thank you. Someone asked a question about whether there's a resources mafia, and it turns out the resources mafia is actually states. So I can't thank you enough for the work you're doing. This is going to be even more important as we get into very contested territory around resources use. The political economy of this issue is really it's wonderful, and to get a clean picture of it, good data and research is really so invaluable. So thank you so very much. All right, we're going to move to another set of presentations, and I'll ask the next 3 presenters to come forward. And if you don't mind, unless you prefer the ones behind, there's spaces around the table. So, all right, please just. Unless you're an advisor to the minister in front of you. Yeah, good. All right, so let's get started. We have another 35 minutes to go with 3 presentations. And are there still people online? All right, so there are 9 persons online. There's no questions. You have 8 minutes per presentation and 1 or 2 minutes for clarification questions, just clarification. And we'll reserve about 15 minutes at the end. My math is terrible. We'll reserve some 10 minutes at the end for discussions. Let's get started right away. The first person would be Deborah Leone, who will talk about digital product passports for universal access to circularity and sustainability information. Please.
Sorry. Okay. So thank you very much for the introduction and good afternoon, everybody. So just to give you a rapid, very quick overview of the agenda for my presentation today. So we will start with the general concept of the digital product passport, and then we will go through the 2 main scopes of this work, that is the sharing of the circular critical raw material information and the disclosing of life cycle sustainability information. Then, of course, we will conclude the presentation with some discussion about the next steps. So starting from the general topic, so what is the digital product passport? According to the EU Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, the DPP provide information about product sustainability accessible by scanning a data carrier, and it should help. It is very important because it should help consumer and businesses make informed choice when purchasing product, facilitate repair and recycling, and improve transparency about product life cycle impact. So in this work, we use this concept to provide the design of DPP system, enabling 2 other scopes, so that the sharing that are the sharing of critical raw material information for reuse operator and recycles, and also the disclosure of life cycle sustainability information for consumers, that are the main information that we can find within the DPP. So starting from the first scope of this work, that are, as I mentioned, the circular CRM information, we try to address this idea by elaborating implementation framework that is mainly divided into 4 different steps. So the first one is the goals definition. Here, the main objective was to respond to the requirements set by the EU Commission for H2020 research funding call. Then step 2 involved the survey creation with the objective to assess the needs and the current practices to manage this kind of information. Step 3 involved the creation of the information exchange and information processing schema with the support of the stakeholders. And the 4th and the last step involved the IT architecture design to conceptualize a little bit the management system. Some findings within this study, that is related to this previous publication, is related to the following main topics, so that the development of the workflows between cycle actor and IT systems, so practically 12 workflows to specify the information examples for CRM supply management system, and 2 other workflows to specify the enhancing disassembly process were studies and created, and also the development of the system architecture of for these workflows. So moving to the second main scope of this work, that is related to the life cycle sustainability information. Also here, an implementation framework were discussed and created to reach the objective. So first step involved the state-of-the-art analysis based on the assessment methodologies within the three areas of the sustainability, the environmental, the economic, and the social ones. Then step 2 involved the identification of the indicators and the selection of the approach within each of the areas. So we select a cradle-to-cradle approach for LCA, the environmental SEC, plus some financial KPI within the economic area, and the UNEP social LCA guideline for the social area. Step 3 involved the classification of the identified indicators. So here the result were 15 default environmental indicator for the first part, then the total cost and plus some eco cost and financial KPI for the second part, and 84 social indicators. As the last, we try to select the most appropriate indicator for the scope, the tier the consumer case, by using surveys to select those indicators directly with the consumer, and also some investigation about integration and aggregation approaches for the indicators. So also here some findings, some results is explained in this slide. So we started with a general framework with its completed indicators. Then we go through the selection of some relevant indicator by means of surveys for with the consumers. And then we move through the investigation about some integrated value within each of the sustainability area to get a total integrated value for each of it, and a total aggregated value for the as a result of the whole sustainability context. Yeah, of course, there is some beneficial point and some critical points within this study. So on the left side, we should mention, for sure, the creation of the sustainability reference framework, the fact that it is a European initiative, a recognized guideline-based framework, the creation of the reference architecture for the CRM information processes that improve trust and security in this context. But on the other side, there will be some critical point. For example, for the sustainability reference framework, we have many indicators. So the selection of indicators of them can vary greatly depending on the consumer we surveyed. Then there is the need to standardize this framework, and for sure also the architecture for the CRM information processes. And as last, for sure, there is the need to deepen the technical design of the IT architecture. Yeah, I'm done. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much. And you saved 30 seconds, so that's good. She was busy counting. Does anyone have any clarification questions? Just clarification at this point. We can have a conversation later on. All right, which means you were very clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. We'll now move to, there's no clarification question online, right? All right, we'll now move to the next presenter, who is Fenya Camps, part of Dries and Sommer at that Technical University, no, TH Köln in Germany, who will talk about development of a methodology for a BMI-based decision support tool in early planning phases in the framework of a material passport for buildings. Fenya?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to present the work I did as a master thesis student together with EPEA, which is part of Dries and Sommer, a huge consulting company in the real estate sector. But EPEA is consulting also on for circular product design, but also recently more on building design. And is also a provider of a material passport for buildings. and my work explores the use of the tool beyond documentation, but as a decision support tool also in early planning phases. So I think we have heard a lot about the impact of the built environment in the recent sessions. But yeah, just there are two problems mainly when it comes to the end of life of buildings. Also, why more than half of Germany's gross waste generation is construction and demolition waste. So first, of course, it's an issue of documentation, as buildings have typically a long lifespan, and often it's not known which materials are contained or if there are toxic materials. Yeah. And then, secondly, it's also a design problem, as building components are mostly not designed for, reuse scenario. So often connectors are used like glue, and in the end, the materials cannot be reused and are downcycled. When looking at this graph, it shows the different planning phases in a construction project, and it gets clear that the biggest influence on the design is actually in the very early planning phases. In the basic evaluation phase and the preliminary planning, and the cost and effort for changes increases over the planning progress. And nowadays, most of the tools are designed for a more advanced planning phase, as a digital or a material passport requires information on the specific material amounts. To help planners to make better and informed decisions, there is a need for adapting the methodology also for early planning phases. What I did in my study. So first, it was important to define adequate reference systems, like for a step-by-step decision support, analogous with the concretization of the planning. And then based on the data of EPEA, first benchmarks were determined on the building level and on a component level, as possible. The benchmarks were determined for different indicators. The material passport contains even more, but the ones I took a look at were embodied carbon, material sourcing, and material recovery. Based on the phase model and also digital planning processes, the increasingly detailed reference systems were suggested. And in very early planning, there is not even a digital model, so rough estimates can be made based on the use type and per, for example, per square meter net floor area. And it can already show trends and which construction types and materials are favorable for circular design. And on an element system level, the goal is to enable estimations based on the classification and area of generic placeholders contained in the BIM model, and to help identify hotspots, and identify which building parts are actually essential for the optimization. And when considering the scopes, it was also important to include the BIM interface, and that it can be linked to manufacturer neutral data formats. And now looking at the like some examples of the benchmark analysis. This is just an exploratory view, because the sample only consisted of 48 buildings, as data inconsistency is a huge problem. And this is the example, for example, of the sourcing KPI. The use of secondary raw material is not yet very widespread. And the default option in planning often is just using primary material, and only when, especially in concrete buildings, and when optimizing like more targeted, then some outliers show up here. But it shows that the decision of the primary structural material, has a big impact. And this is usually made very early in the planning phases, and we can see the differences here. And also an example for on an element level. So this is the example of a load-bearing exterior wall system, and there can be seen, like in the preliminary planning, like usually architects plan with very generic elements, but what is known is the position. For example, if the element is in the basement or a regular floor, and also like decisions if it's a light construction or a solid construction are made. So these already known facts or the different variants or the different decisions that are made, it's shown that there are already big differences. And so incorporating material passports into early planning can be a powerful tool to enable informed decisions for planners in their familiar work environment and as a plugin in digital planning tools. And it doesn't mean that they have to accumulate data by themselves. It has the advantage that in early planning phases, when the level of geometric detail is low, still the information can be used that is already known. And some limitations, as I already said, is the data inconsistency, especially when looking at building components from like real projects, because every discipline looks a bit differently at building components. So it's really intransparent mostly, and even the German Sustainable Building Council, who has certified hundreds of buildings in their study in 2021, they had only 50 buildings that they could actually compare. And when it comes to components, it's even more messy. So that was definitely a lot of work to even have comparable scopes within the database of a single company. Those were my references, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much for that. Any clarification questions? All right, I'm glad you're all being very clear and saving 30 seconds per presentation. We'll have a lot more time for discussion at the end of this. We'll now move to the next presenter, who is Gunnar Shabasi from Norway, who talk about circular economy resource information systems. Please.
Thank you for the introduction, and I will try to be quick here as the last presenter of the day. But yes, I am a senior researcher at the Climate and Environment Research Institute of Norway, and I'm presenting CIRISE, which is a circular economy research resource information system, and this is an EU project, Horizon project that we started in 23. And what I'm presenting here, it's mainly the concept, although we have a lot of work done so far in this project. So let's start with where we are heading. So with this Green Deal objectives, a EU Green Deal wants to make Europe as the first continent of a carbon neutral by 2050. And we have 10 trillion euros assigned for this. And under this, we have to employ a lot of digital tools, that all these digital tools require the critical raw materials. So then we will see more and more rising demand for critical raw materials. Under the European Green Deal, there is a circular economy action plan framework, which will provide the policy framework for countries that will be binding legislation. So then they have with the objective of to reduce the waste generation, promote sustainable product design and right to repair, and also empowering consumer to make an informed decision. But what are the challenges? So then when we're looking at the critical raw materials or in general resources in linear economy, so we see that the material loss along value chain we have a material lost a lot in waste stream. So even if you're like so proud of recovery rate of electronic waste, like in Europe, like more than 75% now, then we see less than 1% of rare earth elements that being recovered or recycled like efficiently in Europe. Then we have information that does not flow with material, and also unharmonized information along the value chain, lack of stakeholder communication, and lack of transparency in value chain. And this is of a major concern when we're talking about the critical raw materials. And this concept was introduced by Professor Gradel and co-workers at the Yale University, so which they call it loss by design. So even if we have a lot of metals that, like they studied 59 metals, and like from there, like we see that less than 20% can be functionally recycled. The rest, it's either dissipated during the use, or like a major are being currently unrecyclable with the current technique that we have, or we have like a large amount that they can be potentially recycled, but we cannot recycle them. And when we look at the which metals are they, so most of them are critical raw materials. So then we see that like even if you're aiming for like a better recycling or efficient mining of e-waste, then we see that currently we cannot recycle them. And this is what we want to do in this project. So then for these elements that they have been used, because like they have been like the composition of these critical raw materials in the products in a way that we cannot recycle them. So we want to see how we can repurpose them, refurbish them, remanufacture them, or reuse them. And for this, like we are using Ceres digital product passport. So then as a previous presenter, like a talk about digital product passport. So then this is the concept that has been developing a lot, but what we want to bring this at the different product component, material, and element level. So we look at this each component and then see if we can bring the information about reusing, refurbishing, repairing, remanufacturing, repurposing, and recycling of a product or a component of the product, and then at the end, element or material together in the digital product passport. And we also want to bring the product environmental footprint. And this is have been also talked previously. So then like if you use LCA or other databases to look at the environmental impact of products. So then this is the information that consumer needs like to make an informed decision. So for example, if you scan your product and then you see, okay, so then the critical raw materials are coming from Russia, the oil, like the fuel was coming from Iran, and 400 people have been killed during the production of this product, and hopefully you will say no thank you to this product. Versus if you see that, okay, so then the green energy has been used, or like 200 jobs have been created here and there, and then you would like to buy this product and you feel better to like use these products. So what we're doing now, we are trying to engage with the stakeholders. So if you're a stakeholder, we invite you to participate in our project. So we want to learn the challenges of the industries, what information do you need to be included in the digital product passport. And we are creating the conceptual framework for the data and requirements and data quality, and also bringing the socio-environmental and economic assessment in the product environmental footprint and this socio-economic analysis into digital product passport. So at the end, we want to create this information system. So to make this transfer of information with the product and the material circular. So we are building all this digital product passport will be inserted to blockchain, and then we are using semantic modeling and the smart questioning. So then stakeholder can communicate with each other anonymously. So then they can share the information as they want, but they can put it in this blockchain, and you can get the permission, or you can choose as a stakeholder which information you want to share with who. And with this, we are have 5 case studies here. So then we have a battery industry, ICT products, printer, and heating and cooling pumps, and also solar panel, that they are the industries that are involved in this project. So we are hoping that by enabling the transfer of information to different stakeholders at a different stage of this value chain, we promote the sustainable product design, empower consumer to make informed decision, we increase the right to repair or repairability of the products, and also we reduce the waste generation. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your attention and all our partners in this project, and European Commission for funding this project, and also US government and UK government that are collaborating or funding this project. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie Hassman from the Mineral Law in Africa Chair at University of Cape Town. Thank you for all of your interesting presentations. I'm very interested in the digital passport idea from the supply side of it. So I'm just wondering, we heard yesterday from Siddharth Kara on the aggregation of materials coming from the informal sector. How do you get down to that granular level in the digital passport? And we also hear a lot about mining companies using subsidiaries. So they're not necessarily reporting on the subsidiaries, human rights violations, et cetera. So how do you take into account those issues? Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So there are, of course, like a lot of detail, especially in socioeconomic impact. And I'm afraid that we cannot get into that, like a level of granularity here. But so then how we do it, it's like trying to get like the input output data. So then that's like a global scale. And as much as possible to bringing down into like the country industrial sector or like a per region, as much as data is available. If not, like if we do data gap filling based on the global, not the global, but then this eco event, like all the databases that are available. So then a lot of this at the moment will be like a data gap filling on that level. Yeah.
Yeah. You had a question, I thought. Okay, yes, please.
My name is Andrew Langus. I'm a business lawyer. I used to be as well lobbyist for the renaissance of the European solar industry. Maybe you recall yesterday I asked the question as well, how can we bring more transparency in these value chains? I think one topic that you mentioned is a collection of data, but I think what's going to be crucial is as well a kind of evaluation. That some kind of independent structure says, well, this data is good, this is not as good, and this is bad. And I think there what we need to do is to make it simple. Sometimes simple is complicated, but so that the users can see, okay, well, like what I mentioned yesterday, like a traffic light. We have red, yellow, and green, but put the reds on the top of the list. So if you have, for example, quite a complicated product like this little thing, where you have, I don't know how many different things inside, that you start with all the red ones, and then the consumer has as well the possibility to choose. And I think if there are more and more consumers that realize, well, we have a choice and we can decide, that gives us some pressure to the companies producing.
I guess that's like for us, actually, this is exactly what we call like a series confirm. And then we have this, actually the model of red light, of a green, yellow, and red. And this is like this is the concept that like we would like to employ. And then in terms of like the quality of data, so then the data that's like the company that is bringing digital product passport and blockchain for us. So then every company or stakeholder that they decide to put the information here and it's decentralized, it will be stamped. So then, and these are the data that have been audited. So then they cannot change it they cannot change it. Once it's on the blockchain, it's on the blockchain. And then it's only like they can they can only choose like how much they want to share with who. So yes, like the quality of data that is provided by stakeholder, it is something that we are trying to like a kind of bring this like a from different perspectives. So then like from the data that we actually collect, and also like this bringing the databases that kind of like we can look at the quality of the data. But then there's certainly a lot of work to do on that front. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Just one additional point. Did you ask Thomas Lamanaukas on Monday? He made a big presentation and looked like he was pretty happy that we're going to have, that he's going to double e-waste. I mean, they've got some money. Did you ask him for funding? And I mean, they have got as well access to data.
Unfortunately, I missed the meeting. I was late on Monday, but yes, please give me, so maybe I can ask them for more money.
Wow, you just made some money. Do you have a question online? Yes, please.
I will read them together, and then first from Eva De Bruin. She asked, regarding the product passports, as the current technology developments are going very quickly, and there are companies already working on similar systems, how do you involve these market players and make sure that the different initiatives are aligned, not all working next to each other? And then we have another question from Lucia Xavier. She asks, how to avoid double counting of products and material volumes through traceability procedures?
Oh, okay. So I can start with the first question, maybe some thought about that. So we are a university, and we have a lot of research in this field. We have a lot of great number of European project active in this kind of field, so related to digitization, involving also the digital product passport. So by working with a lot of stakeholders in a European context, I think this a little bit help on to align different stakeholders in this topic. So yeah, I think, and then another point is that we give very important importance to the the existing standards, and we try to follow the updates and all the things related to that, so we can be aligned on this topic and to progress rapidly with it. Of course, we are a research, some kind of a research center, so that it should our work to do this kind of to be aligned with time. So I hopefully to give an answer to that, and I will for sure take the word to you if you want to add something or answer to the other question.
In terms of like aligning like a different, definitely like it's a new technology. I can say that it's developing now, and then we use what we have like in our consortium, and this like a day, I'm sure, or like what we know, that like they are pursuing whatever the European Commission like says as a standard, and this is like followed by the company, and then we are using that services. So then if there are other companies that are doing the similar thing, and then they perhaps like they have different ways of like sharing the information, I mean, this is a growing industry. So then, yeah, I don't think we can ensure that like we can align all these tech industries together.
I think it's quite worth, especially since you're at the beginning of your project, to emphasize the point on the informal economy. The informal economy, especially in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, is really huge. And considering that Europe import so much from these regions, it is not something you can afford to not address within your project, I would suggest.
Yes.
But I'm not the European Commission. I didn't give you the Horizon 2020 funding, so take that up with them. Yes, please.
Yes. If for the third presenter, but it can be also for the
Could
second.
you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Alejandra Villanueva. I am a PhD student from KU Leuven and affiliated researcher from Universidad del Pacífico in Peru. This is a general worry of me from the past 3 days of the new word. Apparently, the buzzword is passport. So it was blockchain, now passport, and like all these new instruments for transparency. And I was wondering first I think others have already stated the issues with what happens with the informal economy that are part, and that also it is proven time and time that this information, like companies are very cherry picking on what information they would display if they supply from this area. So how you're dealing with that, with those issues. And second, if I were a company and I have to follow standards and now passports and blockchains and I will be very overwhelmed. So how are you also dealing with these aspects to engage companies that this is not extra work?
I mean, they are already committed, the companies that they so then they have to do the extra work. Companies that they are already in the project, but then like the challenge, like as you said, it's like engaging with the stakeholder of our stakeholder. And then, for example, for the company that it's like they are a producer of heating and cooling pump, they have 3,000 partner in their supply chain. So for us to get information, like collect information, so now we only get connected to 20 of them and we are happy. I think like just like to make it as a concept that can work. Like I think like with 20, we are very happy. Like I don't think like we even like don't dream to like get connected to 3,000 suppliers that they have. But what you said, like in terms of the complexity with the battery industry now, it's very huge. Like they already have like a lot of data, and then we have to connect with the supplier of those. And this is something that it's like a very, very tech, and that's why like we are creating like this information system. It is like we have 2 research institute on like the IT part, and then 2 tech institute that are working on it. So we are like, what we are trying to do is just like to harmonize the information that we collect from stakeholder as much as possible. And this is like the whole semantic or ontology, like creating this ontology for supply chain. Like it is a word by itself. But then like we are hoping that we can just kind of like provide a solution to that problem. But then this is like we discuss it in almost every meeting that we have.
Thank you so very much. As a last comment, the 3 of you have presented on the digital passports. It's worth looking back at the issues that were associated with eco labels, things like trust, credibility, overwhelm of consumers, and so on, and to see how they can inform how you're moving your work forward. Other than that, I think it's been wonderful, your presentations. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.